again, and welcome to War Stories Behind the Scenes Tales from the front lines of the media. I am your host, Tom Curley. Welcome to the show. And as you know, this is where we talk about stuff that happened behind the scenes in the ah, showbiz industry. I was a director for CBS for 40 years. And of course, this guy was a veteran actor, a veteran TV reporter from Boston for over 30 years.
I've been
Yes,
accused of acting,
uh,
yes.
I've been accused of acting. We. I wasn't an audio engineer, but I played one on TV. I wasn't a director, but I played one on TV. So, Gary, how are you this week? How you feeling?
I'm, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little bit better than last week, but I still have this friggin' the super cold that is engulfed the entire world that apparently is not COVID. I'm still working with it, but feeling better.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not COVID. Um, so I, I've got the feeling that like the last couple of weeks we've sort of went astray from the original, I think, intent of the show, which is to tell crazy stories that happen behind the scenes, because we got caught up
Right.
with current events, AI, and stuff. So I think maybe this week we'll try to go back to some of it because I just ran some stories by you that I thought we had told in previous stories, but you insisted that we didn't. So we will. And I'm going
Okay.
to let you start off. You start off. You had something to do about a great watering hole outside of the
Yes.
ABC radio network called
Yes.
McGlade's, right?
It's
As
a
I
place.
remember.
It's a place called was a place. I don't know. Someone told me maybe it was you that it's no longer in existence. But anyway, this pub was called McGlade's, and it was run by a gentleman, if I'm remembering correctly, Patty McGlade's, and it was a favorite watering hole for not only the ABC network news staff, but also people who did the Dick Cavett show, which was the studio for the Cavett show, was literally a half a block away from where we worked at ABC, if you recall. At any rate, McGlade not only was the central place for news reporters, but also for visiting celebrities and folks who had deep pockets. And it was a neat kind of just relaxed, and it didn't matter whether or not you were a celebrity or you worked behind the scenes. You were welcome. Uh, as I mentioned, celebrities came there fairly often, so it was not a big deal if a celebrity walked in. On this occasion, I was on a break, lunch or dinner or whatever, and sitting there with a number of celebrity newscasters, and they were talking about whatever they were talking about. Door opens, and a young fellow comes in, and it was apparent from what he was wearing that he was a limo driver, and he was lost. He walks in and he looks around and he says, "Can anybody direct me towards the Dick Cavett show or the studio that where the Dick Cavett show is taped?" And that was a familiar question. So someone started to say, well, it's just, and as the answer was being given to the limo driver, a very familiar figure walked in with an even more familiar voice. And it was the legendary Betty Davis. Now, as I said, celebrities were familiar figures, so no one did eye buggling or anything like that. We just nodded our heads. And Miss Davis said something like, why are you still here? And she was talking to her limo driver, who by this time was sitting at our table with a drink. Miss Davis glares at the driver and then glares even more at the rest of us seated around the table, indicating that she thought that we were responsible for holding him up from going back out to the car. And she said, well, I just told you to come in here and get directions to the studio. Why are you sitting there with those other people, whoever they are? And the limo driver clearly was embarrassed. And someone else, not me, someone else said, well, we just offered the chap a drink because he clearly was anxious and we wanted him to calm down. And Betty Davis stared at all of us with those Betty Davis eyes and said, "Well, if you know who you're talking to, you bet as well shut your mouths up because I have a show to do." And I raised my hands and I said, it's marvelous to see you again. And she just stared at me. "Oh, okay. What do you want to talk about?" And I said, um, "Is that the same outfit that you wore in Parachute Jumper?" And now I could see her eyes getting bigger, and I could see she was fighting between being angry and smiling. And she said, "Parachute Jumper?" And I said, "Yeah, wasn't that a wonderful film you made back in 1932 with George Brent?" And she just said, "It was a piece of crap, kid. And how would you know about that?" And I started to say, "Because," and the whole table at that point, and this is where my nickname, the Maven, came from, because I have a stopwatch. I meant to bring it out with me as a showpiece. Uh, they by that time knew that I was up to date on movies from everywhere. And they said, "He knows everything about movies." And she said, "Well, apparently, if he knows that I made the movie Parachute Jumper, he knows that it was really lousy. And why would he bring it up in present company if only to just insult me?" And I said, "Miss Davis, it's wonderful seeing you here, and I would never take the time to insult you of all people. I thought you were wonderful. Was that a blonde wig you were wearing in that show?" And then she said, "I think you're really pushing this a little too far, youngster." And I said, "Well, I'm glad." And I'm looking around, and the other reporters, Roger Grimsby and Bill Butella, wondering how far I'm going to go before my head gets cut off by Betty Davis. And her face was starting to turn red, and she said, "Blonde wig, blonde wig. I, what is with you?" And I said, "I'm glad you called me youngster and not boy, because that really would have caused a problem here. I don't like people calling me boys. Youngster is fine because I'm younger than most of these other gentlemen." And she said, "You have a wise mouth on you, boy." And I said, "That does it. That really does it. You think you can come in here and insult not only the limousine driver who's working to put food on the table for his family? Look at him. He's shuddering, Miss Davis. And you insulted the finest of New York's TV reporters. And then you turn to me and you're shouting racial epithets? Really?" And she looked at me for a minute, and she could see the smile struggling in my face. And she said, "Ha, you got me. You got me." And I said, "Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm sure it's going to be a bumpy afternoon, isn't it?" And she said, "Okay." And she turned toward the bar to order a drink. And I said, "Wait a minute." And I raised my hand. Patty McGlade looked at me, and I said, "Patty," I said, "it's going to be two fingers, two fingers, not more, not less, two fingers straight of shivers. Plastic, not paper. Plastic, not paper." And he looks at me, and Betty Davis says, "Yeah, okay, you're sharp, because when you put shivers in a paper cup, it just drips right through." And I said, "I know, Miss Davis. I'm aware of that. I'm a newsman." And she said, "Well, I guess you are, youngster." I said, "Good. As long as you don't call me boy, Miss Davis." And she said, "Okay, I think we're done here." And she just smiled and walked out. And the limousine driver shook my hand and smiled and said thank you and walked out. And the rest of the table of the veteran newsmen just looked at me and said, "You really like to play with fire, don't you, Gary?" I said, "Of course I do. You know that." So Betty Davison, our
That was
old drinking
awesome.
hole.
That was that was awesome. Okay, I don't know if I can follow that up. Matter of fact, I'm not even going to
What's the
try.
matter?
But on the topic of sensitive stars, uh,
Hmm.
you know, some quick to temper maybe. I do
Yes,
have a story
yes.
which I thought I had. No, I debated telling it, but screw it. I'm going to tell it.
Oh,
Um,
you have to tell it. You have to tell it.
all right. There were various iterations of the morning news throughout the year. Not only the anchors, but the sets and the location of the sets. So,
Right.
oh, I don't remember. It was probably during the 80s, maybe 90s. One of the iterations of the set was we had the old evening news set, the Dan Rather set, the studio. They
Okay.
basically put a wall halfway through the studio, and on one side of the wall was the morning news set, okay, and on the other side
Hmm.
of the wall was the Dan Rather evening news set, which is a story for another day. And we used to
Okay.
do the 6 o'clock a.m. morning news show, which was a half-hour news show, and we also did the news blocks during the morning show, during the 7 to 9 show, from
Right.
that set, and the control room was our B control room downstairs, and then the morning news, the big show, was done in control room 47 and on the set. So the anchors at the time were Harry Smith, Kathleen Sullivan. So anyway, we this actually happened one day, because apparently, she could be sensitive. So we were doing the 5 minute news block. So we were on the air, and so I'm downstairs doing the news block, and I'm not looking at the morning news set. That's I'm doing my thing. Well, while we were doing that, Kathleen's mic, her wireless mic, died, and we sent out one of the audio guys to replace it. And the audio guy, he sometimes could be not diplomatic. So he went out with the microphone and he said, Kathleen, we got to change out your mic. And she got very huffy. And she went, why? Why? What is
Wow.
wrong with it? And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, well, much like our news anchors, the microphones can sometimes be temperamental. Well, at this,
Ooh.
she at this she burst into tears, got up and ran out of the
Oh.
studio, out into the hallway. All right? Now, panic ensues. The executive Harry runs out of the studio to follow her.
Right.
The executive producer and the senior producer, they leave the control room. They run down the hall after her. The director runs down the hall after her. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, we're still doing a news
Yeah.
report, and we're getting about a minute to the end, which we're going to go, and now back to Harry and Kathleen on the morning news.
Yeah.
And we would be throwing to an empty studio and a control room with no director and no producers. So they were trying to calm her down, and they weren't having any success. And one of them, God knows who it was, noticed that they had a minute before they had to go back on the air. So they told Harry to, get back into get back into the studio. The same thing with the director and the
Right.
producers. And so we did throw back, and we threw back to Harry, who nobody at home ever knew there was a problem. I mean, the
Right.
show
Right.
was clean. The show was flawless. Um, excuse me, was flawless. But yeah, that actually happened. And
Oh,
I
that's
know this may come
crazy.
as a shock,
Crazy.
but yeah, but that audio engineer was removed from the show and moved to another show. Um,
Ah, that reminds me of yeah, all of that panic without the show missing a minute reminds me of that scene from My Favorite Year where Peter O'Toole, as the Errol Flynn character, very, very afraid of being involved in live television, uh, comes through in the clutch for the Sid Caesar type, and he jumps as the Caesar character is being pummeled on stage, and
yes,
one of the
yes.
guys in the control booth said, "Oh God, I love this. This makes me so happy."
Oh God, this makes me happy. Two!
He was the guy that would only talk to the female comedy writer. He would never talk to
Right,
anybody out
right,
loud. That's what. Oh yeah.
right.
Also, that movie has one of my all-time favorite lines. I'm not an actor. I'm a movie star.
I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star!
It's just, there were there were there were so many great lines from that movie. Um, uh, when he jumps off the building, tying himself to the fire hose, and he's dangling, and two guys above him go, "Do you
Yeah.
know that actor Alan Swan?"
Bill, I think Alan Swan's beneath us.
Of course he's beneath us, he's an actor.
No, I mean I think Alan Swan's beneath us right now. Look!
That is such a fantastic movie.
And one of our old colleagues or classmates or whatever we want to put it from Hofstra, Lainey Kazan, who when we knew her, she was Lainey Schwartz, but she plays the kid's mother in this. And she
That's right.
welcomed him into the apartment saying, "Welcome to my humble chapeau."
Welcome to
And
my
no
4 years
one.
at the Sorbonne, and she still can't get it right. Well, it's interesting. Famous Hofstra graduates. Other than us, of course. Lainey Kazan, a graduate from the Hofstra drama department. Francis Ford Coppola, graduate
Yes,
from the
yes,
Hofstra drama department, and Dan Ingram. Now, what's
right,
interesting
right.
is in each case, the Hofstra drama department told all of them that they really would never have a career in acting because they really weren't very good at it. So
Really, I didn't know
basically, it
that.
sort of became known. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They all got sort of like panned by the drama department. So basically, if you graduate from the Hofstra drama department, hope that they don't like you. It's a key for success. Now, of course, things may have changed by now.
I can second that because I was taking a class, an acting class. You mentioned that I was an actor, and in that class was Madeline Kahn, and we were doing a scene from The Rainmaker, and I did my part, which was really horrible, which would have been an indication at that point that no, I was never going to be an actor. My point was Madeline Kahn does her lines, and then the instructor, who I don't remember, said, "I don't think either one of you will have a career in the profession." I took it to heart. Madeline Kahn just smiled, and of course, she went on to prove him very, very wrong.
So, getting back to both of our stories, all right, a lot of my stories come from the fact that management was always trying to cut costs, to cut overtime, to cut personnel. They were trying to save money, and in each case, they always ended up spending more money. Okay,
Right.
and I'll give you a perfect example. Um, the story I just told you about Kathleen Sullivan and the evening news set that was on the other side of the wall. The evening news set that was on the other side of the wall was sort of unique because what they did is they built a the set, his news desk, on a giant disc, a giant lazy Susan
Okay.
that could
Okay.
rotate. Okay, and it was motorized. And the concept is that you could rotate the news desk so the background would change. Like for one segment, you might have the background being all the news writers in the background, and then you could rotate it, and you'd have another part of the set. And they did it for that reason, but the main reason that they did it was that it was motorized, and
Right.
it they could fire stagehands. They didn't have to have as many stagehands, and they would save money.
Right.
Okay, and they spent a lot of money on it. I mean, a lot of money. $1
Okay.
million
What could
dollars.
possibly go wrong?
Probably not.
Yeah.
What could possibly? Well, what went wrong was the motor. It never worked. So in order to move the Lazy Susan, you had to do it by hand. So they had to hire extra stagehands so that they could move the Lazy Susan that never ever worked, and they never could fix it. So I always got a kick out of that, and well, the other one that's even funnier, the one before that, a number of years before that, when Dan Rather first started, and they built him his first set in 47, the evening news. Well, there was 2 floors, all right? And on the second floor, they put a marble floor, and it was circular, so you could stand on the second floor and you could look down at the whole evening news set. It was really cool. And the plan was to have a camera up there that they could use for bumper shots when they went to commercial. And it was nice. It was a great idea. So
Yeah.
the only flaw was they didn't want to buy a 4th camera to put up there. What they wanted to use is one of the cameras on the first floor. So they built an elevator. This whole set, it was like $1 million. It was an insane amount of money for this elevator that you would disconnect the camera, put it on the elevator would go up to the second floor, you plug the camera into another port up there, and, well, there was only a couple of problems. It took forever to go up 1 floor. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the number of floors an elevator has is inversely proportional to the speed by which the elevator will move. If it's an 80-story building, the elevator will move like a rocket ship, all right? If it's only 3 stories, the elevator will take 3 minutes to do it. I've never figured that out, but that's true. The other problem was it made a lot of noise. I mean, a lot of noise. So they couldn't do it while they were on the air. So they had to do it during the commercial. But sometimes they couldn't get it up there and then hooked up in time. But the biggest problem was they had never consulted any of the technicians, specifically the video guy.
Of course not. Of course not.
Back then, those were the big cameras. They were big broadcast cameras, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, had a plug that was like this, huge, and it had tons of connections, not just the video, but the audio for the cameraman and all sorts of things. So back then, before the days of HD, what they didn't know is that when you unplugged a camera from one port and plugged it into another one, you had to repaint and set up the camera, which takes about 20 minutes. Okay? Now, none of them bothered to ask that, go ahead, move the camera up, and it'll be ready to go about 10 minutes after the show is over. So they never used the elevator. So it was like, the lazy. So again, an effort to save money, costing them, more money, or just completely blowing up in their faces. So
idiocy. Middle management idiocy.
And then the best one. I'll close on.
No, go on.
I'll close on
the
ahead.
Last. No, you're on a roll.
The last set, and this was the greatest. After the there was an earthquake in San Francisco. It was during one of the World Series, I think like in the 80s, 87, 89.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
After that earthquake, Dan was there on location, anchoring the news. And at one point when he was off the air, he made just the random comment to nobody in particular, I like standing up. This is comfortable. Now, so what do you think happened? All of a sudden, we have to rebuild the entire set of the CBS Evening News so that Dan can stand up. So they did. So now they kept the original set, and then over in the corner, they built the new set. And it took them months. And they rehearsed for months. Now, the thing about this set was it looked just like the other set, okay? And it looked like he was sitting down. You didn't know that he was standing up. It looked like he was sitting down, okay?
Oh, Lord.
So now the first problem was audio. The audio guy said, well, we can give him a wireless. Oh, we can't. No, wireless can go out. No, never. So they put a wired microphone. So on one of the first rehearsals, he tripped over the audio cable. Well, no, why isn't he wearing a wireless mic? Why isn't he wearing a wireless mic? So they put a wireless mic in, and they solved that problem. And they finally did it, right? And they went on the air, and it lasted, don't quote me, it lasted a few weeks, and maybe a month, okay? But what killed it? What killed it was the first time they had a guest on. In this case, I think it was Bob Schieffer or another correspondent, all right? Well, he had to stand in front of the desk where Dan was sitting. Of course, that he wasn't, but you didn't know that. And everybody at
Right.
home went, "Why are you making Bob Schieffer stand up? Can't you give that guy a chair?"
Yeah.
And it looked ridiculous. And then they scrapped the whole thing. And so it was, and I don't know how much money they spent on that, because of a simple comment. And that's the way things were.
I'd like to
And
stand.
that's the way.
That's
Yes,
and
I would
while
like to
people may
stand.
think this is yeah, some people watching us may think that's ridiculous, but as we've said before, you can't make this stuff up. I remember
No.
back, and I know I told part of the story, but mid '70s, I think, and one of the news directors said, this whole thing, the pace of the show is too static, it's predictable. I want to see motion, not only in the newsroom, but more particularly, I want to see motion out in the field. I just don't want to see my reporters standing there. I want to see them moving around. I heard that, and my eyes lit up. And a couple of my pals said, "Oh, they're going to regret this." And I said, "We'll give them. They want motion. We'll give them motion." And thus, at one station at least, they may have been doing it elsewhere. We started doing the walking stand-ups, and I prided myself on doing the one where you're walking away from the camera, your back is to the camera, you reach a certain point, and then you just turn around and for emphasis, and you look over your shoulder as if you're seeing what damage has been done, and all the while you're talking. Well, some of the other older reporters who were not used to the nuances of this new business, or not used to the just the stuff that the newer reporters did, they tried that, and one really venerable old reporter tried it, and he just fell down right in the middle of his stand-up live. And he, I wish he had had the presence of mind to say something. I think your mind has to be wacky enough to go in the moment. But he just fell down. He was able to just look up and sign off from his location. And Tom, you know this. The news director loved it, but
Loved it,
but
of
he didn't
course.
say, "I want to see my reporters falling down." What he did like was the next time I did a walking stand up away from the camera, I did such a quick whip around that the camera didn't stay with me. So all you saw was me turning around in a circle. And yes, the news director liked that.
Of course they liked it. There was a great documentary that uh, Monty Python's Eric Idle did with George Harrison. It was called The Ruddles. They were a
Yeah.
parody group of the Beatles. They were parodying a documentary like Hard Day's Night. But one of the cool things about it was Eric Idle was the reporter, and he was doing one of those walking stand-ups where he's walking down
Right.
and the
Right.
camera's going backwards and he's walking. Well, what happens is that the camera starts to go further and further back and he has to walk a little faster, and at the end he's running. He's running trying to keep up with the camera, but he's continuing to do the stand up. It was very good.
I used to mark my spots. Just telling a little secret. Before doing that walk thing, I would while waiting to get the cue, I would go and mark the spot that I wanted to stop at. Well, this happened to be a snowy day, and you know what happened. I'm walking and walking, and I'm looking for my little pen on the ground, which would indicate where I stopped. I couldn't find it, so I just took a chance, and I looked down, and I looked around, and then I turned around. It was all it's off the top of my head. And it went well. And the news director said, "How did you know to look down and look around were you looking at anything in particular? And I said, no, I was digesting the story. And I wanted people to see through the movements that there was so much going on that I had to do a complete wheel of thinking without saying that's what I was doing. And the news director said, oh my God, that's so inventive. I said, right. They bought it.
Yeah, uh, apropos of nothing, what we're talking about, I forgot to mention.
That's what it
I
was.
I I I had a cameo. I was on CBS Sunday Morning last Sunday. 20 minutes. She typed and typed and typed and typed, and then what I heard was a dial tone.
Nothing's more exasperating than calling customer service.
I actually
Ooh.
appeared. Yeah. They were doing a
Wish I'd
story
known.
on. Yeah. Oh, you can catch it on Paramount Plus. I
Okay.
got a email from a producer. They were doing a story on customer service, and I told them a customer service story, which actually, if asked next week, I should tell it because you can't make it up. But anyway, thanks to the producers and David Pogue for using little snippets of my 2-minute rant. And speaking of ranting, we've ranted for a half hour. Time for the plugs. Let's see how fast we can get
Wow.
through it. Marilyn's blog, Serendipity, Seeking Intelligent Life on Earth. Yeah, like that's going to happen. Voicescapes Audio Theater for the best in audio drama and comedy and a half-hour radio show. Speaking of comedy, the cult hit from the 80s is still around thanks to the internet. And my sister podcast, Get Off My Lawn with Me, where we talk about life, the universe, and everything. So, Gary, until next week, I hope we remember what we said we're going to talk about because they actually are very interesting.
I hope you remember.
I hope I remember them too. Anyway, see ya.
From these streets, very close to the cavern Rutland, came the fabulous Rutland sound, created by the prefab four, Dirk, Nasty, Stig and Barry, who created a musical legend that will last a lunchtime. They were discovered by their manager, Leggy Mountbatten, in a lunchtime disco very close to these streets. Their first album was made in